And joining us now, great to welcome on our Book Talk segment on Talk Across America, an author of a very interesting thriller, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's a book called Death Comes for the President. And it's really a fascinating story. It's kind of about a character that's almost like a spy, and he has to kind of go in and find out. Well, we won't give away too much right now. We'll bring on the author. William Turner joined us by telephone today. He's based out in California, and he joined us on the show. And William, good to talk with you. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, and thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to have a chance to chat with you for a couple of minutes, and just kind of reading through the notes of the book. I never like to give away too much when I talk to authors of novels, and I'll try not to do it today, but this is kind of based on a character you came up with that has kind of a combination of James Bond and a different kind of spies. And well, first of all, talk about how you put the book together. It's a great story.
What I had done was this. Some readers of mine dared me to write a romance. And I'd never had a riveting romance. And had I stumbled through it, they would have ridden me off. So I had these two people in Texas, and I didn't know what to do with them. And I decided to split them up and have them to meet later. The young man had gone to Harvard, and first he had gone to Harvard and graduated with honors, and his family wanted to reward him by giving him a trip to South America. And there he meets this stunningly beautiful woman. They fall in love, marry, and but she told him beforehand that she could not have children. And but she was amenable to surrogates. And he said, that would be perfect. That's fine because I love you. And so after that, they returned to Texas, and he introduces her to his family and the children. And he had his sights on local government, state government, and eventually on the presidency of the United States. Which he ran for and won. And thereafter, there were 5 murders committed at Walter Reed Medical Center, all in the hematology department. It was only after the case had gone cold. They couldn't solve it, despite the money that Congress, the state had poured into the investigation. When the president returned from his economic summit, which was quite contentious, he was on Air Force One, and they thought he was exhausted. They couldn't rouse him, thinking that he was asleep, only to find out that he had been poisoned. The United States was absolutely livid. They wanted to find out who dared kill the president. And they bring in Sir Robert Winchell to retrace his steps. While he's investigating this, he learns of the 5 murders in Walter Reed, and he begins to connect the dots. And what he found out not only shocked the United States, but the world.
Well, don't give it away. We want people to read the book, but that's a great setup.
Thank you.
And Sir Robert Winchell is the main character in the book. Obviously, your sleuth or detective or spy, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, great,
right.
Great name.
I had introduced him in my first novel, A Murder in Our Midst, and he and Raymond had become fast friends. And the only thing that they had in common was their home here in California. They ended up at Harvard. And after graduation, Raymond graduated and became and went to work for his father, the billionaire Bond. And Winchell became a police officer, passed over for what he perceived were well-deserved promotions. He retired, well, he resigns, and trots off to England to run into the same bigotry and prejudice. Although his letters were cheerful, Raymond knew something was wrong, and he used their international influence to get him a job with Scotland Yard. And Winchell handled a case for the Queen of England. Most delicate it was. And as a result, she knighted him. Everything was going quite swimmingly for Winchell until he receives a letter from Raymond. Come right away. Someone in my family is trying to kill me. Winchell dropped everything and went to the aid of his friend, but he arrived too late. He had been murdered. And he was surprised that the family had closed ranks. The family that had considered him one of their own. And here they were being investigated. They were highly upset. But that didn't deter Winchell. He didn't have jurisdiction, but he teamed up with an L.A. detective, Dennis, and they became friends after they had solved the murder.
Yeah, it's a great kind of a background you gave to Sir Robert Winchell. So he has a great backstory himself, and again, you continue it from your previous novel, but this one, I should say the title again, Death Comes for the President, and William Turner is our guest today on the show. And just your kind of background, reading through the notes, William, I mean, you worked in government a little bit out in California, right? So you have a little bit of a insight into what goes on. So did you use any of that experience in writing the characters in this book?
No, I didn't. What had happened was this. When I was in college, one of my professors had written across the top of the paper, "It's amazing at the high rate of illiteracy here in the United States." I was absolutely floored. I went running to Brother Newman and Brother Ward at Catholic Memorial High School in West Roxbury and asked them, I said, well, what is he talking about? They looked at the paper. They said, well, the paper is technically correct, but you don't have style. And I said, how do I get style? They thought for a moment, and then they said, well, why don't you read mysteries? They're very descriptive, variations and sentences. So I spent that entire Saturday at Boston Library reading none other than Agatha Christie. And when I went back to school that Monday, I was ready. But little did I realize that I had been greatly influenced by Agatha Christie. Hence, my appetite for writing murder mysteries. Also, I was in Boston, and when I decided to come to California, I got a job with the district attorney's office in L.A. And I worked there briefly, and I went on to the state of California. And commuting, I met some police officers. We became fast friends. And they were reading the book. And they admired the investigative techniques. I wanted something that was believable, people could identify with. The harriedness of the investigation, the dead ends, and then the resolve that you're not a super detective, but you pay attention to the details. You look at every piece of evidence there is and arrive at a cogent conclusion. And those individuals were very invaluable.
Yeah, using your experience, but also influence from the genre of mystery writing, and again, you add your own style to it, so that makes for a fascinating book. And again, this one is called Death Comes for the President, and William Turner is our guest on the show today. When you write dialogue, I always like to ask people who write novels, particularly thrillers, is that a fun part of the job for you? How do you go about dialogue between the characters?
Well, I tell you, is that writing murder mysteries, thrillers, is very difficult. You don't have a plethora of ideas. You get those ideas through everyday interactions. For example, I was sitting in church, and the priest was going on and on and on, ad nauseum. And I said, my God, we got it. Move on. And I ran my finger across my throat, gesturing for him to cut it. When I had done that, he suddenly turned around and caught me. I was absolutely embarrassed to no end. And when I was driving home, licking my wounds, it was when I thought of a book that I had immediately come home to draft, Death Comes to the Vicarage. And so there was the idea. But in mystery writing and settings, you have to be able to create believable characters, plausible plots, and by all means, settings. The people of the United States are well-traveled. So when you describe a place, they can readily identify, I was there, I saw this, and it gives validity to it. And Death Comes for the President, I got in touch with the famed Willett Hotel. And luckily for me, the manager had lived in California. And she sent me all of the details of the famed hotel. And that was a plus. And most men, I won't say most, all men don't know how to dress women. And when I was having this ball, I got in touch with Saks Fifth Avenue in New York. And it was a lady who told me how to attire the woman, the accessories that went with it, the entire shop. So I'm very grateful is that the book has been well received. And the plausibility, the dialogue, the entire shot just fell into place.
Well, that's great. I know we talked before we started doing the interview here that I know you're talking to some studios, and just from talking to you and reading the notes, it would make a great movie, so I hope that works out for you.
I'm hoping so, too. It's not egotistically premised. I want to pay my mortgage.
I hear you there.
And that's the extent of that. I was doing something. I was at Walmart, and I was talking to a friend of mine who had walked up, and he asked me how was the book doing. I told him quite well. So the cashier asked me, and she says, "You're right." I said, "Yes." She says, "What have you written?" I said, "My latest one is Death Comes for the President." I read it. I was floored.
Wow.
And she says she was about to give it away, but she said she thoroughly enjoyed it, and that was a plus.
Well, that's great. We'll give out a website, William. People can get more information about the book. We'll put a link as well on our YouTube interview here. But do you have a website you can direct people to?
Well, no, I don't. But they can get the book from Amazon.com.
Okay.
And it's Barnes & Noble. And lucky for me, Sears is carrying the book. Also, Walmart is carrying the book.
Oh, great. Okay, we have the link to the Amazon, so we'll have that on our website, and
right.
And they can get that as well. But William Turner, pleasure talking to you. Again, Death Comes to the President, great thriller, mystery thriller is the genre of the book, and as you heard, great setup of the plot, so we invite you all to check that out. But William, a pleasure talking to you. Please keep in touch through Jerome, your publicist, and love to have you back on in the future. But thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much, sir, for having me.